All right, it is an interesting time of the week. The Browns are off like what feels like double bye weeks, right? Because they got their bye week and then they had a Sunday game, a Thursday game, and then another 10-day break. Here to talk about it all is Cam Justice. Cam, do a lot of great work. You're in the building. Well, you're in the building for the Cavs. You're in the building for the Browns. You're a busy woman these days. And thankfully, you have good vibes to be around, hopefully, this week, all week, no matter where you are, with the Browns feeling much better after getting a win in Pittsburgh. I thought it was interesting, right? There were questions and a lot of like conversation, I think, locally about Kevin Stefanski and his job security. It seemed like there was a concerted effort on Thursday morning to make sure that they wouldn't go into the broadcast with like Al Michaels questioning whether Kevin would keep his job, right? Like it felt like they understood, and like hats off to the PR team if this is what the strategy was, or the Haslam family. They were like, hey, we don't want people to be speculating on a national level about Kevin Stefanski's job security. We're gonna make sure that before this broadcast, it is clear that we aren't intending to do anything with Kevin at the end of the year, because they brought out the full force. Albert Breer and Ian Rappaport, Adam Schefter on Get Up, both kind of put word out that Kevin was not going to be touched there. And then you go out, you win this game, which obviously beating Pittsburgh, I mean, when you have a rivalry as historic as the Browns Steelers, it matters. And, you know, the old Browns would never win a game like this, even when the season got to this bad. So did the vibes match the report in the building as far as like Kevin's job security goes? Like it seemed like to me, as much as we were concerned, given how that fourth quarter against the Saints ended, it doesn't seem like leadership of the team on the player side ever really wavered on Kevin throughout all this.
No, I mean, I will say this, like, I don't think I've never felt a concern about his job security. I've never felt like there was like obviously in any situation where you have the record that the Browns do, no one can truly feel safe, because at some point, if you continue down that path and you continue racking up losses and playing in a fashion that is detrimental to what looks like the structure of the team and how the players are executing on the field, like somebody probably goes at the end of the season. I never thought it was Kevin Stefanski. And you could throw a curveball in there at any given moment, but I never thought that his seat was very hot at all. I think that that organization truly understands that, like, the two-time coach of the year isn't just a two-time coach of the year for no reason. It's not, it wasn't a fluke. They know what they've got, and they know how hard this organization especially knows how difficult it is to find a head coach that can be successful. It's, you know, decades of figuring it out. And here we are, and they've got some kind of, you know, continuity here. And so for me, I haven't felt that around the building at any point. Obviously that Saints fourth quarter was tough. I think in a game like that, the seat on the head coach maybe a little warmer if you're looking at it, but
Mm-hmm.
I think the real, like, where you really look is other coaches, right?
Yeah.
Coordinators, position coaches, those to me are the places where you probably see turnover at the end of the season if this team continues down the road that they're on, because you have to address something. I just don't think it's ever been Kevin Stefanski. I don't think it will be Kevin Stefanski. I think they understand how hard head coaching searches are and that what they have in him. Now, he should own some of obviously what has happened, because he's the head coach. Like, this team isn't doing what they're doing without him. He's got to take that leadership. But I do think the first domino to fall in any kind of turnover or change wouldn't be the head coach in this organization. I think you would probably see those position coaches shifting in, making changes at the smaller scale, maybe a coordinator at the bigger scale, and then addressing something bigger. But the wholesale change at this point, I don't think it's imminent. I think that it could be, depending on how the back half of the schedule works, but right now I don't think so.
Yeah, it's interesting too, because like a lot of people look at Jimmy's history and all they see is that he's fired a bunch of people, right? But I don't think that's how Jimmy processes it. I think Jimmy looks at it and D looks at it as we have had some interesting hires here in Cleveland. And these things have ended in a disaster one way or the other. I'm sure that their scale for this is what they had to deal with Hugh Jackson because they thought they hit a home run with him, right? And it turned into a nightmare very quickly. And I think to them, they're like, okay, well, look, man, it's not what we wanted, but like, I'm not about to act like I'm trying to go back to that. Like, or even risk going back to that or doing these search forms. Like, to give Jimmy some credit, I don't think he ever liked looking for a head coach. Like, I don't think that's part of anything that, like, it seemed like a lot of his decisions, he was like, just make one. Right, like the Freddie Kitchens hire, right? It doesn't seem like he was. They remember they hired the search firm that one year, and then like the year Hugh Jackson was a hot candidate, wanted to stay. He was like, just get it done, right? The Robert Chazinski, there's a lot of like, man, just hire somebody, hires in Jimmy's catalog, and I think that would suggest a man who does not want to be doing this now. Another thing I think is important when we talk about ownership, right, is what makes a team with good ownership, quote unquote, and a team with bad ownership is how much does ownership feel the need to make decisions, right? Is there, what do you feel about the trust between the people who are in charge of football ops right now and Jimmy Haslam, that Jimmy does not feel the need to have to be getting involved on day-to-day decisions? Do you feel like that trust is still there between the Andrew Barry Stefanski regime and Jimmy?
Yeah, I think so. Right now, obviously that can change, and there's some, we'll see how, when the moves are made, if moves are made, I think it'll be very clear how that unfolded, because it kind of outlines itself. You can make assumptions without even knowing, and then when you do find out some things, I think that Jimmy and D Haslam, both as owners of this team, have been hands-on in the past, and we've seen it. And with this regime, they've been able to take that step back and put the trust into them. And I haven't seen it go away yet. And I hope that it doesn't, because I think that is what has made this Browns team successful outside of this season. Obviously, I think there's other factors at play to why this season didn't go the way that the Browns anticipated it going. And we have talked about those in the past before, and we'll continue to talk about them again throughout the season. But I don't think it solely falls on, like, oh, they need a new general manager, they need a new head coach, they need to make big sweeping changes. This doesn't feel, if this was going to be a giant overhaul of this organization, I think you would have seen a big fire sale at the trade deadline, and you didn't see that. You saw the pieces that made sense to be moved, the pieces that weren't likely to be here in the future, the pieces that were aging out of their contracts, aging out of their positions that still had value, and Amari Cooper and Zadarius Smith. If they were going to do a big fire sale and other names were floated as options, and truthfully, like teams are going to around the league are looking at some of these players. You're going to, if they would have traded Myles Garrett, you would have expected a big wholesale change. I don't expect a wholesale change because they know what they have. They don't believe that this part of the season with 3 wins is who this team is and what this roster is. And I think they understand ways to go around it and navigate through it. This was an unfortunate situation, and there's reasons behind it. And there are reasons that can be addressed that can't be addressed this year, right now in this particular moment, because they got too far into it. And maybe that's something that is a criticism that can be put on this team, is that they didn't act fast enough to salvage this season. By the time anything was addressed, it was far too late. I think, and now it's just kind of playing and trying to get wins and hope that things fall your way. And you're like, they're technically not out of it. I know we talk about like, oh, the season's lost because they've lost so many games, but right now they're just trying to get wins, and that's all they can do, because they're not out of it. And it's not officially over, and so they continuously have to try to get wins, and they're doing a good job divisionally in doing that. Now they just got to extend it. But I think that if they were going to make some big sweeping change and then the Haslams lost trust in this organization, you would have seen those moves being made at the trade deadline, and you didn't. And so I don't think that it's gone there yet.
I think the big key is we didn't get the in season Jimmy Haslam press conference, right? Like we've all seen that before. It was like, oh, Jimmy's addressing the media. You only address the media when you feel like you out here making decisions that you are responsible for, right? Like, and I think that to me, I'm like, okay, as long as they have that, they have a down year, okay, but like the ability to bounce back from a down year means that you want to make sure that the football people are still out there making football decisions. I get a lot of questions, and because of the fact that there is not a lot of clarity on what Paul DePodesta does, I think he ends up getting blamed for a lot. Do you have a better idea of what it is that Paul does and if he's involved on the day-to-day stuff for the Cleveland Browns? And like, I know he was brought here to structure long-term the organization, which he has done. Well, what is his job scope beyond that, like going forward, if the Browns aren't looking to make any changes at the structural level?
Yeah, it's not a day-to-day role by any means, I don't think. I mean, it's weekly probably, a little bit more frequent, but he isn't in Ohio almost
Mm-hmm.
ever. Like, it's very rare that he's here. So he's in meetings, virtually. And he does, talk within the front office. He is a part of it for sure. I think, I don't know that it's necessarily, I think the shroud of mystery that comes with Paul DePodesta is that, we talk to Kevin Stefanski twice a week. We talk to Andrew
Yes.
Berry a couple times a year, 3 times usually. We talk to the Haslams about twice, beginning of the season, end of the season. You don't really talk to Paul DePodesta. He doesn't really have media availability. He has had it before, but it's not often, and so he's not really a part of that process of, you're not seeing his press conferences, you're not hearing from him, and I think that adds to the shroud of mystery. But I don't know that it's necessarily a mysterious role. I think what they outlined him as is strategy, and consultation, things like that. He's a big structure of like how they operate, from a strategic level. And that's who he's been. That's who he's always been. And that goes into a weekly thing. He'll give this strategic planning for, what looks best roster wise, what looks best for their future, what looks best in the draft, like things like that. Like he helps
So
evaluate those things.
so
And
like, oh, my bad. Go ahead.
no, go ahead, go ahead.
Oh yeah. So he does, just so to get an understanding of what he does. I think some people have it that like he's like the team president, or like he's kind of like in charge of like hiring and firing maybe Kevin or Andrew Berry, or maybe he's like suggesting analytic decisions on game day or something. Like his role is a little bit more far reaching than that. What I gather from what I've heard about his job, he's basically like pushing out reports about trends of where certain numbers are saying the NFL is going, or certain strategies that the team might want to pursue, or certain traits that are the new hot trend. Like he's basically not the head, but like he's part of the Browns research and development, right? If we were to look at this like a corporation, he's
Mhm.
R&D, right? Where he's
Yeah.
looking into what could the company potentially green light as far as technologies and things going forward with the Browns. It might be something like, hey, what players should be wearing the Guardian caps, and giving suggestions about that, to the people who make the decisions in football ops, which is Andrew Berry and Kevin Stefanski. Or maybe it's something about, certain position groups having players over certain weights and what the studies say about
Yes.
that. Like it's a lot of research and development, and it's a
Mhm.
lot of reports that are getting dropped on desk that are used for consideration, but not mandates, right? I think people think that he's
Yes.
dropping these like he's coming in every week on Zoom and dropping a mandate on, nah,
Start
you got to
him,
play
play
this
him.
player.
Yep.
Yeah. Or you
No,
must draft guys under this age. I think these are just reports that they look at and they form their strategy with some of that in mind. But I
absolutely.
think mainly with the collaboration between Kevin and Andrew in mind. Is that more correct on what it is that he's doing?
Yeah, and you see it with, like the guidelines, right? You mentioned the age in the draft, and the Browns have a guideline of they don't typically draft old, quote
Mm-hmm.
unquote old. They're babies. They'll always be babies, but quote unquote old at different positions. They
I
draft.
saw a player get called old who was born in 2000 and like
Ugh,
what 2003, and I was like, oh,
pain, just pain. Like, oh,
yeah.
come on, we're not there yet. We're not there yet. They're not.
Like they would talk about Curtis work as if he was ancient because he's
Oh,
24, and then
oh
I
God.
realized he was born in 2000. Like,
Yep. Yep. That it stings a lot. It stings a lot. But I mean that age, that those guidelines, like Paul DePodesta absolutely has a hand in those that set guideline. But those guidelines, the Browns have already strayed from that. They don't necessarily go by if a player stands out, if somebody that Andrew Barry likes or his front office is like, yeah, let's look past this guidelines. I think that he extends past that. There's exemptions for everything. There are things that they do outside of it. It is a collaborative effort, and Paul DePodesta helps in the collaboration. It's not just a one-person job. It's not Paul DePodesta, puppet master running things. Absolutely not. Everybody has a hand in it. And he obviously has influence. It's not to say that he's just putting a piece of paper down and saying, here's some suggestions. He has sway, he has power in the organization. He's in a big role. But it is a collaboration. That's what and they use that word a lot. You heard it with the Deshaun Watson when everyone's asking him, who made the decision to trade for Deshaun Watson. It's a collaborative effort. Now everyone had to be on board with it. I think
mm-hmm.
maybe some people were more inclined than others, probably in every step. But that's how an organization works. And so that's Paul DePodesta. I think you nailed it with like the description of like what he does. Those are daily thing, like weekly things for him, and that's what his role is. And it hasn't changed. It's never changed. It's easy
Like
to, point fingers and
for
scapegoat a little bit when the guy is in the shadows and you don't hear from him and see from him. Like, well, it's got to be Paul DePodesta and the scary analytics. That's what
Now,
it is.
let's for a strictly hypothetical example, right? If Jimmy Haslam is considering giving a quarterback $230 million guaranteed, he's not going to Paul DePodesta and saying, "Hey, is this something I should do?" It's more or less of like, "Hey, Paul and Andrew, can you guys collaborate together on a report about like what the possible outcomes of giving this contract are, and could we get out of it, and how much cash is that going to cost me to get out of it over time, the way that you guys handle it, if it goes wrong, if it goes right, like." And they put together a report, or maybe they collaborate on that, or maybe that's like something he asks Paul about when he's considering it but doesn't want to, like, that kind of feels more like, I think people get the idea that Paul is making decisions for the organization.
He's
His
influencing decisions.
Yeah,
He's
he's
weighing out with
more,
the board. Yes.
yeah, he's more of a research development leader and a consultant than
Mm-hmm.
he is anybody who's like strictly making decisions. Now, you did bring up the Watson trade. I'm honestly like, I get football wise why you made the trade in 2022. I think a lot of, well, the further we get away from it, the more we're going to forget that Deshaun was actually considered to be worth the price when you traded for him, outside of the moral implications of it, right? The conversation wasn't, is he worth these picks? It was more like, is he worth what you're going to have to bring into your franchise? Like, is it morally worth it or not? The part where it started to, the tone started to change dramatically is the contract, right? When that contract got involved. And that's the part I think is going to be interesting, because like, I don't think anybody's getting blame for the trade itself. That thing blew up so badly that nobody could predict it would be this bad. But the question is, who was pushing for the contract, right? Like, I'm sure a contract extension had to be done, right? You weren't just going to trade from him and keep him on his Houston deal. But the contract itself, I think, is the part where it's like, hey, let's say hypothetically it was Jimmy that indeed that pushed for that contract to say, hey, let's just get this done, right? Like, let's get him, let's give him what we need if we feel like we can move around, and they felt like they okayed it and they went that way. Then I could see a world where it's like, hey, if this fails, like Jimmy and D have to be like, well, the contract is really what people are upset with. Because if you had traded for Deshaun Watson and you didn't give him an extension and it didn't work out, this would be such a nothing burger because his contract would be up this year and you would just let him walk in free agency and you would move on, have your first round picks, and you would still have Myles Garrett, you would still have JOK, Grant Delpit, all the talent that you have on here to be a much better team next year. So when you look at like the details of the contract itself, how involved do you think football ops was? Like, what, like, I understand they made the decision to go trade together, but do you think this was also the same collective collaborative process on the guaranteed details of that contract?
Yeah, I mean, I think that Andrew Berry in particular has shown, he gets ahead of the curve when it comes to contracts for different positions. When he makes a trade, even trades, right? Like, he's pretty good at getting ahead of the trend, getting the most value, getting value in an extension, and setting the market. He has set the market in a lot of positions since he's been in Cleveland. And I think that everybody understood that the quarterback market was going to change. And there was like this belief that the NBA style contract, right, of guaranteed money was going to eventually work its way into the NFL. And I still think that that
Mm.
will be, I mean, it's working its way. It's not wholesale yet. Obviously, there's positions where it's more prominent than others, but I do think that that guaranteed money will find its way into the league on a wide scale at every position, because that's the nature of sports right now. And it's worked in the NBA, and people don't think it could work here. I think it can work anywhere. You just got to do it. And Andrew Berry probably was a little bit more innovative than others in terms of moving that over into this league and doing what other leagues have done before, but not really at the NFL, not on a big scale. And I think that that's what probably upset a lot of people, is right, that guaranteed money, because that was really the first big scale version of that in this league. We've seen it
Mm-hmm.
all over the place, but not like that. And so it's a big deal to do. I think that was kind of in the trend of him setting a market, thinking, this is going to be the
Mm.
norm. Let's get it done now while it's this much before it gets even higher.
Mm.
Right. And then on top of that, you have to make the money match what Deshaun wants, because Deshaun ruled Cleveland out. At that point, you have done your due diligence. You've gone down and you visited Deshaun Watson as the Browns brass. You've shown interest in him. And now you've upset Baker Mayfield, who is here. Right. And he requests a trade. What do you do? If you don't have Deshaun Watson, what do? You have a disgruntled quarterback who, we don't know if Baker Mayfield would have played another snap, if they would have just tried to apologize. Baker is hard headed, and I don't mean that as an insult. I mean that is his personality.
He
He
wears
and
it on his sleeve, so
he
it might
does.
just been a thing where he would have cooled off to, or something like that, or it might have been a thing where he's stubborn and he's like, nah, I'm not doing it,
I don't want
right?
to do
Like,
it, and there's no way. Like, can we know that for sure? We can't. And so when that situation presented itself, when he like requests the trade and says goodbye to Cleveland fans and does that publicly, what do you do now? Because you either don't have a quarterback, whether it's Deshaun Watson or Baker Mayfield, or you have a disgruntled quarterback in Baker Mayfield, or you can go out and really push for this quarterback that you obviously had interest in, the organization had interest in. I think that's probably a little bit more of what happened with that money too. I think
mm-hmm,
it's a mix of it. But then, yeah, I mean, what are you going to do? You have to have a quarterback, and Deshaun had ruled you out. So how do you get him here? You give him a
mm,
contract that hasn't been done yet, and you make it worth his while. And at the time, again, I say this hindsight's 2020, so people are hearing this and they're like, well, yeah, it's Deshaun, but at that time, how many teams were interested in him? So many. He had said no to Cleveland because he was going to go to Atlanta. Like, that was the move. He was going to be a Falcon, and the Falcons were going to like sign him to a contract. I don't know what that number would have been, but they were going to sign him to a contract. It's not that he was this unwanted quarterback. He had
yeah.
he had inquiries all over the place.
And I believe Arthur Blank's quote after that deal was made was like, "Hey, why didn't we get a chance to match it?" right? Like now he's gonna do his best to bury that quote and act like it wasn't the like
But it, we know
thing,
it.
but,
We know the
but
interest.
yeah, but it was like yeah, it's like the revisionist history because he played like so spectacularly bad, especially at the end. And
Yeah.
like there's very little possibility that he's going to be able to redeem any of this contract. It is going to be looked at kind of in a spectacular fashion. And look, it's going to be one of those things where history is going to want to keep prying at this. And we are going to get a documentary
Oh my
about this,
gosh,
right?
yeah.
Yeah, we're going to get our Red October about what happened in that building during this day. And that will be a better movie than Draft Day,
It's
right?
gonna be
You can
good.
even
It's
hire
gonna be
Kevin
good.
Costner to play Kevin Stefanski at that point. The way Kevin's hairs are great. So yeah, I think it figuring out what went down there seems to be an understanding between all of them, which I think is an indication of a healthy building of like, hey, this ain't turn out how we want it because we just made the wrong bet. Like collectively on him. We underestimated some of the factors about his off the field situation and how that would affect his on field play. We underestimated how much being off from football would affect him. We underestimated how long that would take. And then that would carry into this portion of his career where now he's physically like aging and then he's getting injuries at a higher rate. I think it was a series of gross underestimations that seemed reasonable to underestimate at the time, as a lot of people were like nobody thought that we'd be sitting here 3 years into it and like we're like, yeah, Deshaun's gotten worse, man, than he started when he came back against Houston that first time. So if they can come out this and be like, hey, it is what it is. It just didn't work on an L that large. That is a positive sign that maybe we're not living in the reactionary whims of ownership anymore. And this organization has a chance because look, every single competent organization makes some big mistakes at some point. And yeah, are they as large as Deshaun Watson? No, but you make some mistakes that some people consider fireable, but you're able to kind of learn and peer through. And I would argue you're not going to get people who do better if you keep firing people the second they make a mistake or make a tremendous mess up. Now, that does bring us to the cleanup, right? Because one of the things Albert Beer said kind of indicated to me, oh, they starting to look at the cleanup, right? Like I heard quarterback competition come out of Albert Breer's mouth about the Browns situation next year, which tells me that they're focused on what's going to be potentially a cleanup of this whole thing. How do you feel? How confident do you get the read on of Andrew Berry in this front office and their ability to be able to navigate what is the worst case scenario with this Watson contract? And how prepared do you think they are for the worst case scenario, which they now are in?
I think they've had a couple years to figure it out, right? I mean, amid everything, the first year of Deshaun, there was the suspension, and then he came back, and we talked about rust. And then year two, he comes in, and it's not great to start, and it's rocky. And then there's the shoulder injury that ends the season. And so then he comes into this season, right, with, okay, expectations are very high because you haven't performed in any regard consistently. And then you have the Achilles, but he still was playing poorly leading up into this point. And I think they've had a long time to realize that the sample size is there. And they're not just sitting, I don't think they're sitting twiddling their thumbs, right? Watching Deshaun struggle through various different things. I think at every point in which he struggled, at every single season and the struggles that he had, they're obviously making notes. They're seeing, okay, this is not tracking right. Because if we're doing it, they're doing it. I can promise you that. And from the jump, it was everyone has been tracking what Deshaun Watson was able to do. So I think they've obviously had some kind of a plan in terms of, okay, this isn't trending in the right direction. This isn't tracking. He's not doing well. How are we going to navigate through this? Because there is a future after him. It doesn't end with Deshaun Watson. You have to address it. You have to figure it out. And I personally, I know people have questions around, Andrew Berry's draft history and the production of his draft record. I think that this year, this upcoming year, will be a totally different ball game, right?
Mm,
Because for how since Deshaun, they haven't had first round picks. And as much as people are off and on again with Greg Newsome, he's been productive for them. And I think what really sets Andrew Berry apart is what he does with the picks after, the value that he finds. Like in in the draft, he took Greg Newsome with the first, and then got Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah. And to get
hmm
both of them and to have him fall and to have those gems, they're both starters, they're both. And so I think you have to take it as a whole package. If you
Yeah.
swap if you swap the two, no one would have any problems.
That's a great point. I think I brought this up where I'm like, if they had drafted Grant Delpit at JOK in the first round in 2020 and 2021, and then you got Jed Wills and Greg Newsome in the second round, I don't
You'd
think
be
people are running around thinking that like Andrew Berry's not good at the draft. I think this is merely like a matter of perception. And what could help that perception is if he hits on a first round pick this
Yep.
year, right? Because like I think the ideal of like, hey, Jed was the best shot you had with the earliest pick, and Jed has been a disappointment. Greg, I wouldn't say Greg's been like as much as a disappointment as Jed has
No.
been. Like Greg's been more consistent. You're not like you didn't bench Greg, right? Like to
Yes.
play an
Greg has played
experimental
well in
tackle.
many games. Yes.
Yeah. Greg has his moments. I understand Greg grates on people because he celebrates to 100% no matter what, right? Like I get that. Because like some players have that tact of like, okay, like celebrate, but like to a 6.
He
Like
doesn't want to get the low. Jim Schwartz will knock
yeah.
him and he knows it. He's just making sure his defensive coordinator stays off his
Uh-huh.
back.
Yeah, because like sometimes you'll see Denzel do something, they down 14. Denzel gives like a fist pump and maybe like a little hand tap, but he's not doing the whole like unless they up something, right? Because he has that tact of like, okay, I'm gonna do 80% because we up right now, right? Or we coming back. So I'm starting it going. But Greg can make something happen after like giving up something, and on the next one, he's doing and it's like, Greg, buddy, you at 100, you need to be at like a 6. You gonna not get the low still. But
He says he's
I
gonna be
get
himself. Let him be himself.
but I get why Greg feels the way that why people feel the way about Greg. But I think that sometimes gets in the way of what they think of him as a player. He's still a fine enough corner. He's put in a tough spot too, where he has to play slot and he's undersized for a slot guy. So like, yeah, he's gonna get eat up by some bigger tight ends every once in a while, especially the more athletic ones. But yeah, I can see. But if you drafted JOK in the first round, who like legitimately is a game changer at the defensive side, the all of a sudden we're like, man, he nailed it in the first round, right?
Mm-hmm.
But then we're not as bothered by his draft history. We'll see what pick they get here because like they may be in the top 10, they may be a little bit outside of it. I imagine that they'll probably win a game or two down the stretch, probably end up with like 10, 12 in the pick range. And I think it's imperative that Andrew get somebody that hits with that first round pick, just so it's something that people aren't talking about anymore. Because I would love to feel as enthusiastic about Greg Newsome as I do about JOK, but unfortunately, it's not the case. Not that Greg's not a great player, it's just you want your first round pick to be the best player in that draft class. He's not. And the same thing with Jed, right? If I would love if we had Jed under an extension, he was playing as good as Grant Delpit does, but that's not the case with Jed. But it doesn't mean that you didn't draft Grant Delpit, though, right? Or Martin Emerson, or DeJuan Jones, or Cedric Tillman. And I think a lot of people kind of start to erase some of the things that like he does because they go back to that first round success. We'll see what he does in the first round this year. The rest of his draft history tells me that it's like he's probably gonna draft somebody good in the first round. Like, and if he gets a home run, let's say like you get like Abdul Carter or something like that, he turns into like a top tier edge next to Miles, and there now you got somebody to pass. All right, then nobody's questioning Andrew Berry's ability to draft. It's funny because like the opposite of what's going on with Andrew Berry actually went in with the guy that people prop up to criticize Andrew Berry, which is John Dorsey, right? Where John, if you look at the drafts, if he didn't have the extra first round picks in 2018, boy, we looking at that different, right? You took Baker Mayfield number 1 overall, Austin Corbett number 33, and now we looking at it crazy. But he got those extra picks, got Denzel Ward, got Nick Chubb, and we don't even look at that 2019 draft anymore, right? Like that 2019 draft, I think Sione Takitaki was the only solid player that they got in that entire thing. But nobody ever talks about it because, hey, you got Nick and you got Denzel. And I think Andrew just needs to hit on a first round pick or wait until JOK stays healthy for a year. Hopefully he can recover fine from that injury. I guess we could talk about that next and see where it goes there. But I think that's the main thing Andrew really needs to do. And the last thing to talk about before we finish this conversation about the Browns, JOK. What's up with that whole situation? Because to me, my read of it, and I'm just speculating like everybody else from the outside looking in, I'm not seeing things that would be indicative of somebody whose career might be over, right? Like that's not the vibe that I get. What's the vibe that you get?
No, I don't think so either. I mean, obviously we have to wait and see. But for him to be released from the hospital the next day, to be walking around, to be at the facility, and he shared that he's doing well. Kevin Stefanski shared that he's doing well. He's been posting on social media, different things, different awards, Ghana awards in Ghana and some food and things like that. He's very active on social. I think what happened, truly, I think what happened was, again, we go back to the Jed Wills business decision conversation that we had weeks ago, right? And bad choice of words. It's not what was meant. I think what happened was a bad choice of words from people talking about him. What really the quote that changed the narrative a lot was, and it wasn't his fault. I don't know that he intended to do it with this. Clearly is not what he meant, but Jordan Hicks was asked about Jeremiah, and Jordan Hicks said that, if he has a miraculous recovery, and that word miraculous makes you think that there needs to be a miracle for Jeremiah to play again. And Jim Schwartz did it too. Jim Schwartz, said, like, I asked him about Jeremiah and he gave me some guys that had similar injuries, that had long roads, and hopefully he can recover the way that they did. And what I think the core is people just wanting him to, be back fully 100%, no adverse effects from this injury, because it is a serious injury. Any neck injury, any head injury, concussion, those are serious injuries. And so I think that the use of words here change the narrative in which we're seeing this. And that's to no one's fault, because when you hear that, when you hear miraculous recovery and we hope that he can get back, you think okay, this could be it. Like this is serious. I just have not gotten any feel. They haven't been very open about, the steps. Kevin Stefanski did say, he's got 2 more games on IR. I think that if it was as detrimental as it is, we would have maybe heard a little bit more. I think just the shroud of the vagueness of it, and just, he's on IR, he's doing well, mixed with those words, has created this narrative that he'll never play again. I don't think that is the case. That is not what I am feeling. That's me personally, with, what I've heard and how I'm taking quotes and how I'm hearing conversations. I don't necessarily have the same fear as maybe some people who have seen things online feel. That said, Jeremiah should take this very seriously. I mean, absolutely. This is a neck injury. Don't rush it. There's no reason. If he doesn't play another snap this season, would that be the end of the world? I don't think so. But could he play another snap this season? I think he could, depending on how severe this is. We don't know all of the details, but the vibes that I'm getting are not the doom and gloom. It's more just, he's hurt. He had a serious injury. We're taking our time. And that's what we want to take our time.
And maybe I have football brain, because when I heard those quotes initially, I didn't process it like reporter or content creator, where I'm like, oh my God, he might never play again. I'm just thinking it's going to be pretty tough for him to have that injury and be able to play the same way that he played again, right?
Mhm.
Like with that same kind of recklessness and fearlessness that he had
Yes.
with the injury like that. And I think, like, in my mind, maybe that's football brain. That's what I think they mean by miraculous, or like maybe they're like thinking about that where it's like, man, it's gonna be tough. Like they're just thinking about like how tough it would be, and I'm pretty sure that's what Jim Schwartz is thinking. But it's one of those things where you think it in your head, but you never say it out loud. So
Yes.
there's steps that are missed in the communication that then when you hear it, all you hear is miraculous recovery and there's no big update, and then you go to wherever you go to. But I think they're just so locked in on football season. They're just thinking about this like football players, where it's like, man, it's gonna be tough to go back in there and shoot the gaps like he does. Worried about an injury like that, it's gonna be tough. Like it's gonna be very tough. But I think they're speaking more to the mental part of it than like if he can physically able to recover. Because let me tell you something, football players would not be vague if they did not think he could physically return to the football field again, right? Like that is something you usually know when somebody's career might be up. It's not something that gets hidden and then kind of like gets thrown on you. Usually there's a lot of things that happen that tell you if a football player is never going to play again. And sometimes them things happen, and then DeMar Hamlin's on the field again the year after it goes now. So, I think it's just that was an interesting lesson in like how things get how the media and how the players and how they say these things, it intersects, and it can sometimes amplify things that might have been unintended, and this is like a prime example of that.
Yeah. I will say, I don't think that it's like, I don't even think it's necessarily anyone's like, it's not like based off of anyone. It's no one's at fault here for
Mm-hmm.
any, like, because I mean, at the end of the day, we could get news next week that something has changed, right?
Yeah.
It's super vague, but the way that I perceive something is different than the way other people perceive things. The way that you heard those quotes is like, I think we probably like very same wavelength. Like I was like, oh, okay, like, yep, serious injury. They're just talking about it. They're at a press conference
Mm-hmm.
getting ready for the game. I didn't necessarily read too far into it, but if you read more into it, sometimes that is what you have to do in this industry for sure, is like read between the lines. And so I can absolutely see why that was,
Yeah.
an if I just personally, I'm not subscribing to that narrative of him not being able to play again. I don't necessarily think that that is the main, the most realistic outcome of this. I don't think that's,
Yeah.
I think the most realistic outcome is that he does play again. And that like you said, that it maybe takes a little bit more caution when he is making a play, when he's going at a guy, at least initially, right? Just because you
Especially
have
in
that
the open
top of
field.
mind.
Yeah.
Yes.
And I would argue it would make him a better football player sometimes if he takes some caution in the middle of
Just,
the field.
pull
Well, in the
back,
open
protect
field,
yourself a little bit. Yeah.
because sometimes he does need to slow himself down,
He
right?
flies around and we love the playmaking. Absolutely.
Yeah.
But yeah, no,
But
sometimes it's like, what, protect yourself. What are you doing?
But yeah, it is interesting. And like football is one of those things, and I'm like reminded by this constantly because my girlfriend's like not involved in football at all. And sometimes like you get yourself in this time where like you're thinking football brain and you're like in this and you say something and they're like, what? And it's like, oh no, it's not like that though. Like it's but you're just so stuck into the football that you're using like football language. And I think that sometimes, if sometimes somebody can have a very sobering moment where they're like, whoa, what did you just like, did he say miraculous? Like,
Is that what
and
he
then
meant? Did he mean it like
yeah,
that?
yeah, and then it kind of has a life of its own. But Cam, thank you for coming on talking about Browns with us. Make sure you guys go check out Cam's stuff. She does a lot of great stuff for News 5. Go follow her on Twitter and on Blue Sky at Cam E Justice. Anywhere else to plug yourself?
No, just News 5 Cleveland. And I don't know when this comes out, but right now it's rivalry week. So I've got a very, very cool episode
Ooh.
of Mo Eats with Mo Hurst coming out real soon
Ooh.
for
Do we
that.
have any? We have Buckeyes on the roster too
Oh
now, right?
yeah.
Oh,
When he
Michael
joined us on
Hall, same room.
Oh
Like,
yeah. Oh, they don't make bets, but there are challenges.
mm-hmm. Oh yeah, oh yeah, oh yeah, oh yeah. That should be. There's a lot of Ohio State, Michigan guys on this roster now,
You
right?
got Ohio State,
Denzel,
you got Denzel, Ronnie Hickman, Luke Whippler, DeJuan Jones, Mike
Zach
Hall,
Zinter.
Zach Zinter, and then you've
Yeah.
got, Mo Hurst.
Yeah, is Mo Hurst, is that the only two Michigan guys, Mo Hurst and Zenter?
Yeah, no, I think yeah, there might be. Let's go
Well,
through.
no, DPJ's not here no more.
Oh yeah, he's
He's
not here.
gone. And then maybe it's somebody like on the P squad
Yeah,
too
yeah, yeah.
that's there. But yeah, none of the
Oh,
quarterbacks
Buckeyes are
changed.
holding down the fort in that locker room. Let me tell you what.
Hey, for the long time, like people
They
were
didn't
complaining
take
about the
anybody. There
Browns.
was no one.
Yeah, yeah, they weren't taking them, and now the Browns are full of Buckeyes there. So that's another thing that's been interesting to see. But Cam, thank you for being on. Y'all have a great day. Have a good night.